Welcome to UnCommie Goods. The pandemic of 2020 exposed America's reliance on Chinese-made goods. Not only were we short on critical life-saving equipment, much of it from China ended up being defective. We were caught with our face masks down. They played us. Why is America handing off production of critical goods to China, and what can we do about it? Here on UnCommie Goods, we expose the nefarious misdeeds of the Chinese government: prison labor, suppression of human rights, theft of intellectual property, imperialist actions towards other nations. The list goes on. Let's hit them where it hurts. Stop buying goods made in China. And it's not all doom and gloom over here. This show celebrates the makers of UnCommie Goods, the stuff made right here in America, maybe even in your own backyard. Meet the people behind small American businesses, learn the secrets of their success, and how buying American goods supports innovation, local communities, jobs, and economic opportunity. And I'll even crack a few jokes while we're at it. Let's make it in America. I'm your host, Lars. This is UnCommie Goods. Welcome to UnCommie Goods, episode 25, Drugstore China. We lost the Pharmaceutical to China. The title inspired by a great movie called Drugstore Cowboy with Matt Dillon back in the day. So recently, I was stunned, shocked, blown away to learn that China makes the majority of the world's prescription drug supply and pharmaceuticals and whatnot and medicines. Blown away, stunned. About 90 to 95% of the world's prescription drug supply. They are indeed, quote, the world's pharmacy, as described in this amazing article that was shocking by a gentleman named Shivan Chabria in the March 23rd, 2020. That's when he published it on a website called American Greatness, amgreatness.com. It's about a year ago. I had no idea, and it kind of shook me up. And so apparently, China, this is all part of China's plan. It's from their 13th 5-year plan, and they had a Made in China 2025 platform, and it seems like they're hitting all their targets. So, and I think that maybe there's an advantage to being a totalitarian Marxist-Leninist regime. You can put together a 5-year plan, and anyone who opposes it gets killed. There's something to be said for that kind of effectiveness. And all joking aside, we can't even do a 5-year plan in America because every 4 years is an election and, consequences, and everyone's just focusing on getting reelected, opposing political parties. There's checks and balances. But hey, at least here we have freedom of speech, and I could be opposed to something that the government's trying to do without getting killed or disappeared or having my family or pets murdered. So there's that. Speaking of getting murdered, China absolutely killed any and all competition worldwide in the manufacturing of prescription drugs, medicines, and pharmaceuticals. I'll get into that later. I feel a little bit removed from the world of prescription drugs. I aim to live as healthiest life possible. I never want to be on any prescription drug ever. However, that's wishful thinking. What if I get sick, get hurt, I need some sort of, blood thinners or antibiotics or something like that? What about the next virus that's actually really, truly deadly? Well, guess what? Here's some disturbing facts. So the 3 most important antibiotics used to treat anthrax: Ciprofloxacin, doxycycline, and penicillin, they're no longer made in the United States, or they're made in such small quantities that the supply chain is effectively controlled by China. We don't have a strategic manufacturing supply of, those antibiotics. And another thing, it's the United States no longer makes penicillin. Yes, you heard that right. The last penicillin fermentation plant in the U.S. closed in 2004. I think the U.S. invented penicillin. I'm not sure, but that seems likely. So how was this possible? What the Chinese companies did, they cartelized. They formed a cartel of companies to collude on the pricing. They sold product on the global market below market price. That's called product dumping. And it drove U.S., European, and Indian producers out of business. So guess what happened once the competition, was eliminated? The prices went up. So that's what happens when the prices go down. You go for that, below market price. You buy that. All of a sudden, everyone else is gone, and the price goes up. It happens all the time. If you don't know what product dumping is, I looked it up just so I made sure I knew what I was right. It's from a website called thoughtco.com. They say that dumping is an informal name for the practice of selling a product in a foreign country for less than either the price in the domestic country or the cost of making the product. It is illegal in some countries to dump certain products into them because they want to protect their own industries from such competition. And of course, that such competition is unfair competition, and I could and should do another episode on how China manipulates their currency so they can do this kind of stuff. But, remember, they have a 5-year plan, so they can sell stuff below cost because they know they're looking at the long term. They're not waiting, quarter by quarter, trying to make profits, etc. And also with that 5-year plan, as I mentioned earlier, anyone that opposed to it gets killed, jailed, or disappeared. So they can price dump, and wait it out until they destroy the competition. And again, voila, the prices go up. So I linked to this article in ThoughtCo about price dumping. And, I dug around ThoughtCo, another great website that talk about science, tech, math, humanities, languages, all interesting stuff. So another thing to think about, back in 2001, shortly after the 9/11 attacks in New York and the Pentagon and such, there was an anthrax attack. People were mailing it to various individuals in Capitol Hill. And the only source that the U.S. government was forced to turn to for, anthrax life-saving drugs was a Portuguese company, Hovion, and they had to buy 20 million doses of doxycycline, a drug originally invented and developed in the United States. And then the other thing to think about is Hovion had to buy the chemical starting material from China. The CEO of Hovion, Guy Vilax, he warned, quote, "If we were asked to do this again, we would be dependent on China providing us with key starting materials that are unavailable in the rest of the world." Disturbing, to say the least. Another drug, Ciprofloxacin, an antibiotic used for the treatment of both anthrax and bubonic plague. The patent for that expired back in 2004. Now, Ciprofloxacin is mass-produced by some generic drug firms that acquire a key ingredient, dichlorofluorobenzene, from one of 4 Chinese companies or 2 Indian firms. There is no American-made source for this antibiotic. And I don't expect the bubonic plague to come back, but these days, anything could happen. Okay, fine. All these drugs are made in China. Is that such a bad thing? Maybe they're high quality. For example, a lot of the electronics we get, iPhones and stuff, they're high quality and they work really well. But, I don't ingest iPhones. And rest be assured, I'm not getting another iPhone. I'm getting something made outside of China. But again, we don't ingest iPhones. So relatively speaking, they're safe. They're not going to kill us, right? And as far as I know, Apple hasn't started implanting, their operating system into our neural pathways, at least not yet. I'm not aware of it. So as far as I know, drugs in general are a little bit more risky because we ingest them. We put them into our bodies. So that being said, would it shock you to learn that Chinese-made drugs are made of dubious quality and has led to deaths? Yes. So there's a drug called Heparin. It's an injectable blood thinner. It's used for the treatment of blood clots, and it's an anticoagulant. So back in 2007 and 2008, there was Heparin from Chinese manufacturers. They found out it was linked to the deaths of nearly 246 Americans. This pharmaceutical company called Baxter, they had subcontracted the creation of the precursor chemicals of Heparin to a company with production facilities in China. And here's the the worst part, a lethal counterfeit precursor costing a fraction of the true starting material was deliberately placed during the manufacturing process in China for economically motivated reasons. Since then, the FDA continues to raise concerns that some of the original Chinese companies are operating under new aliases and supplying their products to third parties, thereby circumventing their alert ban. How do we let this happen? The FDA, quote, continues to raise concerns. What the hell is that? I'm not inspired or impressed or, grateful that they're raising concerns. Drastic action needs to take place. Where are America's leaders? These companies have changed their names and become third parties. And, there's a law with pharmaceuticals that, if I supply a company making the drugs, they don't have to say where I came from, what the ingredients came from. So you know, yeah, so these companies, they just circumvent and they beat our regulations and, tricked us. So another wonderful story, quote, valsartan, a commonly used blood pressure medication with a tainted saga, received widespread news media coverage in 2018 when certain batches of Chinese manufactured valsartan contained per pill more than 200 times the acceptable interim limit for the carcinogen, I can't really say this word, N-nitrosodimethylamine, otherwise known as NDMA, N as in Nancy, DMA, not MDMA. Subsequently, at least 2 more carcinogens and a potential 4th one was linked to its Chinese manufacturer. Now, can we go inspect those factories, make sure they're on the up and up and not screwing over, the drugs that are delivered to us, life-saving medicines and treatments? Technically, yes, we can. That's where the good news ends. China has mastered getting around regulations and inspections. FDA inspectors can't show up unannounced to domestic facilities, here in America, but overseas, they get, weeks or months of advance notice. Would you think that the Chinese facilities would not exploit that advantage? Here's some wonderful highlights. This was actually in India, so U.S. inspectors were given contaminated drinking water after they found Indian-made insulin had black metallic particles in it, and when they, quote, caught an employee absconding with a bag full of destroyed manufacturing records, end quote. Great. You start finding problems, all of a sudden you get contaminated drinking water. Here's another doozy. Quote, FDA inspectors were held hostage by company officials in China at a Chinese manufacturing facility after the inspector began uncovering systematic issues around testing the purity and strength of the drug product, end quote. Now, this is leading to the worst of all possible scenarios. It's bad enough that they're making faulty drugs. Drug shortages. Now, I said it earlier, I hope I never need prescription drugs. I try and be healthy, but I bet a lot of Americans don't want to be on prescription drugs either. But guess what? What about an accident, unforeseen condition, or an illness that you get, and suddenly you need life-saving or life-enhancing, improving drugs or pharmaceuticals or medicines? What if the hospital is out? Right? Is this a crazy, wacky scenario? No, it's not. Check this out. Quote, in 2018, a survey of 719 pharmacists nationwide by University of Chicago researchers found that in the span of the past year, all experienced at least one drug shortage, and 69% had experienced at least 50 shortages during that time. That's all in a 1-year period. So imagine 50 drug shortages within a year. What is that, like one every 7 days? I'm not sure. I gotta run the numbers here. So the author of this article, Shivan Chabria, hope I'm pronouncing his name right, he's not the only one who thinks that we're vulnerable. Hearing straight from the horse's mouth, quote, an article in Xinhua, the state-run media agency considered the mouthpiece of the Communist Party, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. China bragged that it could throttle pharmaceutical exports and plunge America into the mighty sea of coronavirus, end quote. Those are not the words of a trusted trading partner, someone we can rely on, that we count on. They just took all that manufacturing. They pretty much drugged us. And when we were asleep, they drugged us with low prices. And then all of a sudden we wake up from, being price roofied. And all of a sudden they're running the global drug trade, the legal drug trade. So again, how do we, the leader in pharmaceutical drug research and innovation, hand over this critical last step? How do we let this happen? Price dumping is one thing, but how did we just oversee this? I'm still shocked, So again, China literally drugged us by artificially low prices, but I think now we can fight back and start making these critical supplies at home again. What can we do? I do think there's probably a way to incentivize our pharmaceutical companies to begin manufacturing their process, the drugs and products here in the United States, and they can be inspected, without notice, right? I think that'd be awesome. Write your senator, your congressperson, write these drug companies, let them know you would support them to making products back in America. And as well, our government, they do, they have an incentive to invest in strategic, important, industries. Defense contractors. They should also reach back out and make this happen. So that's what I'm looking at doing, and I'll probably send more information on our next podcast. Also, again, this is the first time I'm putting an episode on YouTube. So I'm going to be sharing my podcast on YouTube. I might go back and link them back up. So I'll put a link to my YouTube channel. Also, I implore you to read this article that I put that I'm talking about now about the China's monopoly on making drugs. I linked it in the show notes. It's on my website at uncommiegoods.com/episode 25. Again, please spread the word. It would mean the world to me to share this podcast with your friends. Subscribe to it on your favorite podcast platform, and most importantly, go to the Apple Podcast app and search for UnCommie Goods, give it a 5-star rating, and then write a review. That really helps drive the all-important algorithm. It gets this podcast out there and spreads the word how important it is to make American-made goods and not outsource everything to China, because they do not play fair. They do not make high-quality goods. They sell us things that could kill us, as you saw in those examples I discussed before. So again, support this podcast, support American-made products. And if you ever want to reach me, you can write me, Lars. I'm Lars. You can reach me at hello@UnCommie Goods, and I replied to all emails. In the previous episode, I talked about some of the things my readers, or listeners, have asked me about or mentioned. So shoot me a note. I could discuss whatever you want to learn about or share on this podcast. So again, UnCommie Goods, episode 25, Drugstore China. We lost the Pharm aceutical to China. Again, thanks for listening. Really appreciate it. It means so much. And get that word out.